and ever to rejoice in his consolation through the same Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Sorrowful and Immaculate Heart of Mary, Saint Joseph, Saint Leo II, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Before we begin the instruction, you're going to find in the blue books, you're preparing for your general confessions, the main essential part of confession is sorrow for sin. And you find the examination of conscience on page 19 onward. You got the 10 commandments. Each commandment is thoroughly covered. And then you have the 7 capital sins, 6 sins against the Holy Ghost, sins of parents, sins of the married, sins of husbands. Have you treated your wife in a gross, cruel, or tyrannical manner, beaten her or abused her in your anger? Have you made her unhappy by your coldness, stinginess, neglect, and unfeeling conduct, or by spending your leisure time too often away from home? Have you failed to treat her with attention and forbearance when she was in a delicate condition? So yes, the husband must cherish his wife and not treat her like a doormat. Have you compelled her to act against her conscience, to sin against the laws of nature? Have you neglected to support your wife and children? Have you squandered your earnings on the property of your wife? Or squandered the property of your wife? Sins of wives. Have you caused discord by your selfishness and jealousy, and by your unfriendly conduct towards your husband's relatives? Have you made your home disagreeable by your ill temper, scolding, and fault-finding, or by pretended or imaginary ailments? And so forth. Sins of students. Have you abused the liberty you have at college or school because you are far away from your family? Young ladies, young men, and so forth. Have you cultivated your intelligence with good reading, or have you wasted your time with novels? This was done before internet came out. So, have you wasted your time with video games? That's a sin. For men of all ages, to spend hours and hours and hours on video games is a sin. It's a total waste of time, and it doesn't build anything. It has ruined many a boy and many a man, the video games, and they can last for months, months and months. Oh, if you can find the light back there, you can turn that on. Sins of employers, sins of employees and servants. Have I paid a just price, etc.? Sins of magistrate and public officers. Have you embezzled public funds or used them to your own advantage? Have you given scandal or by open neglect or disregard of your holy religion and your Catholic duties? Lawyers, notaries, and clerks of court, doctors and surgeons and physicians. Have you hazarded dangerous remedies or made merciless experiments on patients in hospitals or on the poor? Page 32. How often have you been guilty of these sins, and what were the results? Have you failed to consult other physicians when necessary, or have you made choice of such as would connive at your mistakes? Have you caused needless expenses by unnecessary consultations, useless visits or costly and useless remedies, etc.? Have you taught or encouraged the use or abuse of opiates, liquors, etc.? Have you hastened anyone's death at his own request or the request of his relatives? Have you failed to warn those in danger of death so that they could receive the sacraments in time? Have you suffered a child to die without baptism? Oh, but I'll get lawsuit for that. Well, you can do it in secret. If you know a baby's dying, just secretly baptize him. How many times have you been guilty of these sins? Druggists or pharmacists? Have you sold medicine or any other object to destroy life, to hinder conception, or to excite the passions? Have you sold liquor to drunkards? Have you sold morphine or other opiates to those who abuse these drugs? Sins of having a hotel, bar, or public house. Have you overcharged your guests or adulterated your liquors? To what amount and how often? Have you given liquors to drunkards or to those partially drunk, or allowed anyone to drink to excess in your house or place? How often? 33. Have you made your house a place of dissipation on Sundays and even during Mass? Have you allowed gambling in your establishment or tolerated blasphemy, obscenity, or quarrels? Have you kept immodest pictures or papers in your house? Is your business an occasion of sin to your neighbor or injury to your family and a hindrance to your own salvation? So these are very important things to consider in your preparation for the general confession. Remember, in our confession, the key thing is to be sorry for our sins. And, Father, why do I have to do a general confession if I confess my mortal sins already? Well, you don't have to. They're already forgiven and forgotten. And if you've never done a retreat, I remind you, go since the earliest time you remember sinning. If you've done a general confession on a retreat, just go back to your last general confession. That's all you got to say. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. These are my last confession was 3 weeks ago. These are my sins. Da 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 da. And I would like to make a general confession since my last general confession, which was a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Or I want to make a general confession of my life. It's best to write it down and then afterwards destroy it. I do not recommend writing, you don't even have your cell phones, so, but I don't recommend putting your sins on cell phone. Nothing on there is ever secret. So, and then tear it up after, burn it, whatever. And the key thing is we must confess all mortal sins, all circumstances that change the nature, such as to sin with a woman who's not married and you're not married, that's fornication. It's a mortal sin. It'll take you to hell if you die unrepentant. But the sin, to sin for a married man with a married woman, or an unmarried man with a married woman, or a married man with an unmarried woman, as long as one of them is married, it's not only a sin of fornication, it's also a sin of adultery, which is against justice. And then in confessing these sins, we must also say if there was birth control or contraception used, especially if it was on the woman's side and you paid for it or knew it, because a lot of these pills cause abortion, and that must be also confessed. You're not certain, but they do cause abortions, many of these pills. Another sin often forgotten, which many married people don't realize is a sin, but the priests usually, when they prepare marriages, they're going to tell them, once you're married, you surrender the rights of each other's body to each other. You're two in one flesh, so that if one spouse asks for the marriage debt, the other must give under pain of mortal sin. Did you know that? But I'll tell you what, it's a cause of many marriage problems. And usually it's the wife who at the age of 40, 50, 60, she's not interested anymore in the marital union. The husband asks, and he asks, and he asks. She refuses, she refuses, she refuses. Each time is a mortal sin for her. And if the man is asked by his wife, and he refuses, that's a mortal sin, except for extremely grave reasons. Extremely grave reasons. And the reason why it's a mortal sin is because the spouse has a right to that. It's part of the deal. And maybe you got a headache or whatever, but that's just part of the deal. You have to give, that's part of the, for some it's a sacrifice for marriage. For most men, that's not the problem at all. It's usually the women who refuses. The men are always ready. But sometimes it is the man. And why is this a mortal sin? One, because you're denying a right to your spouse. Two, you are giving the occasion. Usually it's the other way around. Women who refuse their men. If she keeps refusing, and he's not a man of prayer, and he's a weak soul, he's going to find somebody else. That's why it's very dangerous. That's why Mother Church is very wise. You don't refuse the marital request. But a lot of marriage problems stem from this, believe it or not. And a lot of wicked women will use it to gain ascendancy over her husband. Well, if you don't let me get my brand new car, well, forget the marriage debt for a month. She can't do that. And that's an abuse of the marriage rights. But a lot of marriage problems stem at this level. So remember, that's just part of marriage. You get married, even if you're in your 70s or 80s. When the husband or wife asks, they have to give. And as I said, except for very, very serious reasons. What would be a very, very serious reason? If the wife is a drunkard, she's an alcoholic, she's not seeking help, she's not overcoming her vices, she's not taking care of the children, she's neglecting the house. And even then, you got to be very careful. But these are just a few points to bring up. A lot of people wonder if marijuana is marijuana use a mortal sin. Okay, all right. Aside from true medical problems, real, definite medical problems, where marijuana helps alleviate that pain, that's tolerated. It's not a sin. But to use marijuana to get stoned, to get high, is a mortal sin. And that goes for fentanyl, which kills many every day, and harder drugs. And sins of blasphemy against God. If I let myself get a habit of taking God's name in vain, it's my fault. And it becomes sinful. Okay, just a few points. And remember, the key point of confession is be honest, be simple, be generous with God. Remember, if you or I have the audacity, the boldness to whip our Lord and kick him in the face and punch the living God and crown him with thorns and nail him to the cross, to be forgiven, our Lord could have said, you got to swim across the Atlantic Ocean. You got to walk through a mile of fire. You got to walk on your knees for 12 miles on gravel. And if that was the condition to have our sins forgiven, there'll be some who would do it. But God is not asking that of us. All he asks of us is sorrow for our sins and humility of heart to confess them. And if I'm so proud as to punch the living God and crucify him, I better be humble enough to confess them simply in confession. That's all that our Lord requires of us, is humility of heart. And believe me, the priests never hear anything new, especially Father Ruiz and I. I'm 31 years a priest, Father's 49 years a priest. So we haven't heard anything new, believe me. And it doesn't matter what priest is there. You're confessing to Jesus Christ the King, to his most sacred heart, and he's a merciful Father. Plus, there's the seal of confession, that the priest has the grace to just forget everything. And he cannot say anything outside of confession, what he's heard in confession. If he wants to bring it up, he has to ask the penitent permission. So the priest can say nothing, and many priests have gone to death, concentration camps, jail, prison, because they would not reveal what was said in confession. St. John Nepomucene is one of those martyrs. He was drowned because he wouldn't reveal the sin of the Duke's wife. So let's consider quickly now the battle of Catholic tradition in this instruction. A quick overview of the battle we're in. And it is a battle, and it's a battle till death, but Our Lady's going to have the victory. So as long as you stay with Catholic tradition, as long as you stay with the fight of all the great popes that we covered the other day, and of Archbishop Lefebvre, Cardinal Pie, Father Denis Fahy, as long as you keep that fight, you're going to win. You're on the winning side, because Our Lady's going to crush all the enemies someday. She said, there'll be a time when I overthrow the Freemasonic grip on the whole political and ecclesiastical world. So let's look at this real quick. First, 1962 to 65 was the Second Vatican Council. There was about 3,000 bishops. 250 of them were hardcore traditionalists. 250 bishops were hardcore modernists. And the rest of the bishops were floating in the middle. If you walk in Rome, they have the names of all the bishops at the Second Vatican Council. You'll see Marcel Lefebvre in Latin up there. They should put that in gold someday. And right during the council, Archbishop Lefebvre already was saying, I accuse the council. This is going against tradition. This is going against all that the popes have condemned. It was Archbishop Lefebvre who prepared the commission before Vatican II, 2 years with a team of the Cetus, the group of fathers who were traditional. They were going to ask the Pope to condemn communism. They refused to do it. Reveal the third secret of Fatima. Pope John Paul II said, this is not from my pontificate. So if he even saved his soul, he's probably in purgatory until the consecration is done. That goes for Pius XI, Pius XII, John the 23rd. John the 23rd is no saint, nor Paul VI, that's for sure. So Vatican Council II was the nuclear blast in the Catholic Church. It was the triumph of the French Revolution, the Communist Revolution inside the Church. It is loaded with heresies, loaded with contradictions, loaded with ambiguities. And Hans Kung said, one of the priests there with Father Joseph Ratzinger, who were both there in their suit and ties as priests. Hans Kung said, Luther left the church. We're staying in this time. We're staying in this time to destroy her from within. So now, ever since the Vatican II, you got the conciliar church, the whole implementation of the council, so-called reforms, which was just absolute destruction all over the face of the earth. Loss of faith, churches desecrated, empty seminaries, empty convents. Archbishop Lefebvre said it would have been better if these 10,000 priests who abandoned their priesthood after Vatican II, it would be better for them had they been martyred in the French Revolution and had their head chopped off. At least they would have died martyrs, but now with Vatican II, it just destroyed the priesthood, destroyed the religious orders, especially the contemplatives. And then Bonini wrote the new Mass, which was prepared since 1955. He said it took 7 stages for his group to overthrow the Tridentine Mass. And one of those stages was the 1962 Mass, and then the 65 Mass, which brought in vernacular. And then the 69 was the triumphant new Mass of Paul VI, which is not legitimately promulgated. It is not legitimate. It does not sanctify souls. It's not good for souls. And it's a schismatic bastard rite. And I'm just quoting Archbishop Lefebvre. He called it a bastard rite, a mass bâtard, which means illegitimate. And all the priests know this of the society. They all know this. So they betray our founder and our Lord when they agree that the new Mass is legitimately promulgated, which it's not. 1968, Archbishop Lefebvre resigns from the Holy Ghost Fathers. He is told by the higher-ups, you must implement Vatican II. Archbishop Lefebvre says, I'm not having any part with this destruction of this beautiful missionary order, of which he was the superior general, the largest missionary order in the church, in the world, with priests in Africa, Asia, Viet Cong, South America, the Eskimos of Alaska. Beautiful congregation, founded by a convert Jew. Archbishop Lefebvre resigns, and then some young men come to him saying, we want to be priests. The parents call him up and say, where do we send our boys? All these seminaries are rotten. They're teaching modernism. Archbishop Lefebvre realizes he's got to do something. So he accepts some young men. Among them is Father Tissier and Father Duchelard. They were one of the early birds. And he receives them and starts training them. He starts sending them to Freiburg University for classes. They're the only ones wearing cassocks. They realize that Freiburg is teaching modernism also, the Catholic University in Switzerland. So Archbishop Lefebvre realizes he has to do the seminary himself. So he starts from ground zero. And he starts receiving candidates, forms them, and there he, in 1970, founds the Society of St. Pius X. Archbishop Lefebvre, of course, has the Catholic spirit. He wants the approval of the church. He turns to Bishop Adam, who approves it and praises it. But then the same Bishop Adam, in a few years, will go against Archbishop Lefebvre. So he held very dear that it was truly a branch of the Catholic Church, a congregation of priests for tradition. The main goal of the SSPX is to continue the Catholic priesthood, continue the sacrifice of the Mass, but what they often forget is the other part, which is to battle the modernism and heresies of Vatican II. 1974, you have the famous declaration of Archbishop Lefebvre, which was actually written after the visit of the three cardinals from Rome. But this beautiful declaration is still our banner. We adhere with all our heart to Catholic Rome. We refuse modernist Rome, the neo-Protestant Rome. And we turn a deaf ear to all the novelties of Vatican II. And even though not every single word or part of Vatican II is heretical, nevertheless it is soaked in heresies. It is influenced by heresies, the whole thing. So that's the great declaration, 1974. 1975, three cardinals visit Rome, from Rome to Écône. These cardinals are a bunch of modernists telling the seminarians that we can't be sure the resurrection of Christ really physically happened. Married priests is on the talking table, and other nonsense. So Archbishop Lefebvre is fuming with this. And that's where he wrote the declaration. So this is actually 1975. 1976, the Archbishop Lefebvre will continue ordaining priests. He is threatened by Rome. If you do this and you don't shut down your seminary, Pope Paul VI will suspend you, ad divinis, which in normal times is a terrible punishment. But here it doesn't even hold water because Archbishop Lefebvre is simply doing what every bishop in the world is supposed to be doing, ordaining true Catholic priests. So the suspension is null and void. And then he gives in 1976, in the July, the famous sermon of Lille. If you look up on the website SSPX Marian Corps, we were able to put up that sermon. You can hear it in French, but it has the English subtitles, and it's very, very powerful. You hear the young Archbishop Lefebvre preaching, and he is not pulling punches. He talks about Freemasonry. He talks about the marriage of Freemasonry, the revolution, and the church, and how this is an adulterous union, and this adulterous union produces a bastard daughter called the New Mass. You never hear Bishop Follet talk like this anymore. Nor Bishop Tissier, nor Bishop Della Galaretta, nor Bishop William, not even Bishop Williamson anymore. He's pushing the whole new Mass miracles now. And the new Mass can nourish your faith. What happened to the 4 bishops? They've all been neutralized, to put it kindly. Neutralized. Farmers have other words. 1988, the consecration of bishops, which was to save tradition, and it was a heroic act. Bishop de Castromayor will come up from Brazil, stand with Archbishop Lefebvre as a co-consecrator. He will make a very short speech. When the faith is threatened, we must stand to defend it, even correct our superiors, even if it's the Pope. So I stand with Archbishop Lefebvre as an act of faith. He quotes St. Thomas Aquinas, and it's a wonderful event. I had the privilege to be there. I had the privilege to meet Archbishop Lefebvre while I was there. I thanked him. Thank you for saving the church. And he smiled and he pointed to heaven and he said, no, we must thank God. We must thank God. The first words of Bishop Williamson as a bishop, he started off great. They all did. His first words as a bishop in the conference hall, where the meal was afterwards, was "C'est la guerre." Everybody remembered that, which means in French, it's war. It's war for Christ the King against modernist Rome trying to uncrown and crucify Christ the King. The 4 bishops will really do tremendous work. They will travel the whole world doing confirmations, ordaining priests, strengthening the faith. Bishop Follet started really good. He started really well. He was against the compromise of Campos, Brazil in 2003. They made an agreement with Rome. Archbishop Follet even said, this is suicide. You don't make agreement with Rome until Rome comes back to tradition. Bishop Follet still had his head on straight. But somehow, in the year 2000, 3 of the 4 bishops met with Bishop Castrillon Hoyos. Bishop Castrillon Hoyos, remember, he's the one that removed the Catholic Constitution off of Colombia to allow all the abortionists and false religions in, uncrown Christ the King. He meets with them over a nice dinner and dupes Bishop Follet. Bishop Williamson still has his head on straight and says to the cardinal, this is 2 different religions here, Your Eminence. The Catholic religion and the conciliar religion. They can't mix. Bishop Williamson was right, and Bishop Williamson held strong and roared up until 2015. What happened in the 90s? Bishop Follet started to weaken. He sent priests, Father Duchelard, Father Laurens, and some other priests, to go to the GREC meetings. GREC is an acronym for Groupe Réflexion Entre whatever. It's a French thing meaning basically a gathering of priests. It was founded by Father Michel Lalonde, and he wrote a book also. And his whole goal with GREC movement was to discuss among all the traditional and conservative priests, how do we get the SSPX to tone it down? How do we get them to just shut up and get inside the church and let's all work together in the big ecumenical efforts of peace, progress, and ecumenical reform? The SSPX priests go to these meetings. They are chiseled and it weakens them. Bishop Follet is terribly weakened. You don't compromise with the faith. You don't dialogue with the enemies of Jesus Christ, and you don't tone it down. When our Lord commanded the bishops and priests, go preach to all nations. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. Whoever does not believe will be condemned. Christ commands the bishops to preach the Catholic faith. He commands it. And that's why the silence now of all the traditional bishops is a crime beyond belief, for which they will answer heavily. when even the Virgin Mary said many souls will be lost because of the silence of the prelates. So the whole goal of Grec was to get the SSPX to get an agreement with Rome, tone it down, stop being polemical, and go with the flow. But we need you, SSPX. We need you because you're the conservative element in the church. And remember, this fits perfectly the modernist conception of the church, which is, according to Cardinal Ratzinger, you always need the liberal element that's always pushing for reform, women priests, get rid of the Latin Mass, implement Vatican II, but you always need the dialectical opposite, which is the conservatives in the church, the Lefebvrists, the traditionalists. And this clash between both the Hegelian dialectic, which is a communist way of thinking, this clash between them brings a new reform. So Tridentine Mass, Novus Ordo Mass, this struggle in the church will bring forth the hybrid Mass, the answer to all our problems. So let's build altars, freestanding, with no gradines, tables facing the people, but not yet. And let's bring out a hybrid Mass, which will be the Tridentine Mass with English Epistle, English Gospel, maybe the Creed, the Credo in English, but keep the Tridentine consecration. Pure fallacy, pure nonsense. When Pope St. Pius V said, nobody dares to touch this Tridentine Missal. If they do, they will incur the anger of Almighty God and of St. Peter and Paul. They are cursed who change the Tridentine Mass. They are cursed by God. 2000, the meeting with the Bishop Hoyos. 2007, by this time, 2005, 6, 7, Bishop Fellay is meeting with Pope Benedict XVI. He's all smiles. It's wonderful. He has big dreams and hopes that he's going to be the personal prelate over all of tradition, which is the rumor right now. That Pope Francis will shut down all the other Latin Masses. They'll all have to come under Bishop Fellay as the personal prelate over all of tradition. And he'll just slowly bring them into the conciliar church, which he's already in anyway. So those meetings, and remember the Rosary Crusades, which is maybe why the Society of St. Pius X has been punished with a certain blindness, because they dared to insult the most blessed Virgin Mary by using something very holy and good, such as the Rosary Crusades. But it was all previously planned between Pope Benedict and Bishop Fellay. And Bishop Fellay called for the Rosary Crusades, and oh, the miracle! We've got Summorum Pontificum. Oh, and another miracle! He lifted the excommunication. When they already pre-planned this, and it's really at root a betrayal to tradition. And to drag Our Lady into this betrayal is an insult to her. And I dare say it's a punishment from heaven that the SSPX priests and bishops are now blinded and silent and going along with the revolution by their silence. If the house is on fire, does that person commit a mortal sin who doesn't warn everybody upstairs, get out of the kitchen, get out of the house, it's on fire? If you're silent, silence is not always golden. And if a man is silent when he knows he has to shout, and he's silent, he's guilty of all the deaths. He will answer to God for all those deaths. Same with bishops, popes, priests. If they're silent, when the church is on fire, the modernists are taking like wolves the sheep to hell, and they don't shout and roar, they'll also be condemned to hell with those they're guilty of having been lost. Summorum Pontificum is very evil. I'll tell you why. They celebrated it. Bishop Fillet had the Te Deum sung in all the chapels. I never did it. Why? Because the cover page of this letter said, anyone who uses the Tridentine Mass, the 62 Missal, which is interesting how they allow that one, but not the Pius X Missal, but that's another question. Anyone who uses the Tridentine Mass, 62 Missal, they must accept the new Mass as the ordinary form. And Pope Benedict XVI says in there that the two missals are mutually enriching. Christ and Satan are mutually enriching. Oil and water can mix. He reconciles the irreconcilable. And Archbishop Lefebvre would never have gone along with Summorum Pontificum. Why? Because it's a trap. They allow the Latin Mass, but he restricts it actually more strictly. You have to have the bishop's permission to say the Tridentine Mass. You have to accept the new Mass as the ordinary form and the Tridentine Mass as the so-called extraordinary form. And it's very sad that many society priests now, even in their bulletins, refer to their Mass. This Sunday we will have the extraordinary form Mass at 10 and 5 p.m. 10 a.m., 5 p.m. They call it actually, they buy into that, which is a betrayal. You cannot put the new Mass at all on an equal level with the Tridentine Mass. And to do so is a sacrilege. But that's what Pope Benedict does. And an Archbishop Lefebvre, who dealt with Cardinal Ratzinger, he said he's a shady character. He's a slippery eel. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing, and he even called him a snake. Because Pope Benedict is responsible, out of his own words, he says, we will get these traditional groups to slowly abandon their rigid positions and accept the council and accept the new Mass. So, he made the deal with St. Peter's. As soon as Archbishop Lefebvre consecrated the 4 bishops, he said, we could give you the Tridentine Mass, but you have to accept the council in Vatican II and the new Mass, at least in principle. Oh yes, we'll keep the Latin Mass, we'll work under the bishops. And even today, the St. Peter priests do not have a bishop. They're all working under these modernist liberal bishops, which is deadly. They have to give communion in the hand if people come up like this, or the bishop punishes them. If their hands are out, they have to give communion in the hand. The St. Peter priests are not allowed to condemn the new Mass at the pulpit. They're not allowed to have books in the bookstore that condemn the new Mass. I know there are many good intending and holy St. Peter priests. Some of them have better sermons condemning evolution than the SSPX priests. But they're still, in principle, based on liberalism. They have to compromise with Vatican II and the new Mass. They have to. And under Pope Benedict XVI, you got 1988, St. Peter's Fraternity. 1990, the Institute of Christ the King, which also compromised with Vatican II and the new Mass. In 2003, the Diocese of Campos, the St. John Vianney group of priests, founded by Bishop de Castromer, they made their agreement with Rome by accepting Vatican II and the new Mass. 1988, also the great monastery of the Benedictines in France, La Barroue. Archbishop Lefebvre said it was a pity they made the agreement with Rome. You watch, in 5 years, they will have the new Mass. And in 5 years, they had the new Mass in the monastery. Of course, with the Latin Mass. And then they also wrote a defense of the religious liberty. So they really fell fast. 2012, the Redemptorists made the agreement with Rome, the famous Redemptorists in Scotland. And in 2012 was the agreement with Rome of the SSPX. We're coming to that. 2009, the four bishops write a letter to Pope Benedict XVI saying, please lift our excommunications. Remember, Archbishop Lefebvre considered these excommunications a badge of honor. He said, because we want nothing to do with this Church of Assisi, of evolution, this conciliar church which is destroying the faith and attacks Christ the King. And here now are the four bishops on their knees before Pope Benedict, please lift our excommunications. Who are they asking? Modernist Rome, who are out to destroy tradition. They're asking modernist Rome to lift their badges of honor. They betray Archbishop Lefebvre, they betray our Lord. Not one of them have recanted this letter yet. And what they should have said was, don't lift our excommunication, but lift the false decree of the excommunication, because there was no excommunication at all. It was null and void. And the best canon lawyers in the whole world defended Archbishop Lefebvre. So it was a real shame, and I think perhaps that's where they lost many graces. In 2010, begin the new dialogue with Rome, with Bishop Fellay and the priests of the Society of St. Pius X. They start meeting with Rome again. They don't listen to Archbishop Lefebvre, who said, no discussion with Rome, no dialogue, until Rome comes back to tradition, until Rome proclaims Quanta Cura in the Syllabus of Errors of Pius IX, until Rome proclaims the kingship of Christ, Quas Primas of Pius XI, until Rome gets back in line with Pascendi of St. Pius X and the anti-modernist oath. And he goes through all the encyclicals of Pope Leo XIII down to Pius XII. If these modernist popes won't agree with their predecessors, it is useless to talk. And Archbishop Lefebvre was right. And had Bishop Fellay just held that position, the SSPX would be a powerhouse today of the resistance. But they had to be infiltrated, and they were. So now they start the dialogues over again. Even Father Michel Glaise, not Anglaise, but another priest, Glaise, who was there during the whole discussions, he said, it is clear Rome is on FM, we're on AM. They don't have the Catholic faith. You can't even talk to them about sacraments, because they believe something different about sacraments than St. Thomas Aquinas and the Council of Trent. They're modernists. But I remember that letter of Bishop Fellay in 2012 to all his priests. It came out in one of his letters in the Cor Unum, which is a priest bulletin for all the society priests. And it came out saying, Bishop Fellay wrote a big long letter basically saying, we have new friends in Rome. We have to change our attitude towards Rome. And then that same year came the General Chapter Statement in July of 2012, which said, the key sentence was, we approve and are determined for the eventual normalization of the Society of St. Pius X with Rome. In other words, we are ready for the agreement. Now, Bishop Williamson, in his great years, he used to read to the seminarians the story of the walrus and the oysters. And the stories from, I think it's Aesop's Fables. I forget who wrote them. If anybody knows, spit it out. But anyway, long story short, the walrus goes for a walk with the carpenter. They're walking along the beach and they come near the rocks, and there's a whole colony of fresh oysters. And the walrus and the carpenter say, why don't you come and join us for dinner? We'll have a fun time. Lots of butter, lots of bread. Come and join us. And the young oysters say, this is great, let's go. But the old wise oyster, Archbishop Lefebvre, says, no, it's a trap. But the young oysters, they don't listen to the old wise oyster, and they follow the carpenter and the walrus. Before long, they're given a nice bathtub. Hey, this is great. We even have a sauna. And the water goes up and up and up, and the story ends by the carpenter and the walrus wiping their mouths with their napkins, saying, that was a very fine dinner. So that's what happened to St. Peter's. They fell for that trap. That's what happened to Institute of Christ the King, Oasis priests, the St. John Vianney priests in Campos, Brazil, the La Barroue Monastery in France, the Redemptorists in Scotland in 2012. But the big fish was the SSPX. They had to tear it down. They had to infiltrate it. They had to neutralize the SSPX. Get them to tone it down. Stop being polemical. Stop being the voice always criticizing the scandals of these rotten popes and their Assisi meetings and their Pachamama dances. And you notice at the Pachamama dance, Bishop Follet, he burped here or there a little bit, but that was it. If Archbishop Lefebvre was alive, the whole world would have heard a roar against such a scandal of having a pagan idol, a devil inside St. Peter's, and allowing the pagans to dance around it. And Pope Francis, unless he converts and repents, he's got a huge hell waiting for him just for that, let alone all his other scandals. So pray for him. So, the excommunication is so-called lifted in 2009. In the same year, Bishop Follet has Bishop Williamson has his meeting, his interview with some German newspaper, and he says very correctly, it's my opinion there was not 6 million, roasted. That hits the roof. And Bishop Williamson is put on the penalty box. He's put in the penalty box by Bishop Follet. Bishop Williamson always taught this, and quite truthfully, he's right on these questions. He's right. I'm not here to go into that here, but just to say on that point, he was absolutely correct. Instead of backing him and just saying, well, at most, it was his opinion. That's what he said. So Bishop Follet should have backed him and said, leave him alone. That's his opinion. But instead, they all turned against Bishop Williamson. Was this a ploy? Was this a setup? I wonder often if it was. I really do. But suffice to say, Bishop Williamson is put on the penalty box. He's put in England. And he's still able to write letters. But even then, he's told, stop writing these. And his letters were very good. He has a famous one called, O senseless traditionalists, who has bewitched you? Based on St. Paul's letter to the Galatians, O senseless Galatians, who has bewitched you, that you should fall from the faith? And Bishop Williamson wrote a great letter among a number of them, where he says, O senseless traditional Catholics, who has bewitched you that you should fall from the faith and go to compromise? So those were great letters, and that was in 2010, 11, 12 period. And then the horrible doctrinal declaration of April 15th, 2012, which they're now trying to cover up. They're trying to say it never existed. What? Lies. And they say it's only the resistance that made this up and publishes it. Well, they took it off of all their websites, the SSPX. Dici, it's gone. Angelus, gone. SSPX, gone. But it's a historic fact. And we all got it in the 2013 March issue of the Corunum. It's there, and every priest has a copy, so they can't say it never existed. And this document has to be rejected and condemned if Bishop Follet hopes to save his soul. He signed it, and he sent it to Rome. And he approves it. And he's never condemned it, he's never retracted it, he's never, ever openly opposed it. So that's the doctrinal declaration. Basically, in a nutshell, it says we accept Vatican II in the light of tradition, we accept the new Mass as legitimately promulgated, and all the new sacraments, and unquestionably valid. And then they accept the new Code of Canon Law with no distinctions. They say in this that Vatican II enlightens tradition, and tradition enlightens Vatican II. This mumbo-jumbo of modernism. 200 years from now, good Catholic theologians will study the doctrinal declaration and say this is a modernist document, and anyone who signed this betrayed the faith. So the doctrinal declaration comes out 100 years to the day of the sinking of the Titanic. It was the sinking of our dear SSPX, sad to say, with great tears and lamentation. Attached to the doctrinal declaration and general chapter statement is the 6 conditions for the agreement with Rome. In other words, the 6 conditions to sell the property of Catholic tradition. For sale. A genuine, true revolution and overthrow. It's the Vatican II Part B of the SSPX. It was Vatican II Part B. Vatican II in the SSPX. And the proof that it is not just Bishop Follet smiling and he's naive and he was misled and he didn't quite understand. The proof of that is he let loose expulsions after expulsion after expulsion of good priests from the SSPX. Good old priests who stood up against this revolution. They were kicked out, put to the streets. Many of us were silenced. I preached a sermon at the June First Mass, right after the ordinations, the day after, of Father Stephen Reuter. All I did was quote Archbishop Lefebvre. We can never make an agreement with Rome until Rome comes back to tradition. I just quoted him extensively, and that put them through the roof. Father Rostand hunted me down. I didn't even have my cope off yet. And he said, Father Hugo, come to my office. If that sermon goes on internet, you are going to be expelled from the country. Bishop Follet, I called him. He said, do what your superiors tell you, which was to get sent to New Zealand, which I would gladly have gone if it was a just and not against the faith. So I was silenced. He said, you cannot preach anymore. For what? I said, for what? All I did was quote our founder. Well, you shouldn't preach that way at an ordination and all this. And Bishop Follet told me, I said, so what, are you going to make the agreement with Rome? He says, well, we got to move slowly, step by step, which is his procedure. And he is doing that. And even when you get swallowed by a snake, it's step by step, right? The snake has to slither you up, then swallow you whole step by step. So that's how Father Suelo put it, for the Rome swallowing the new SSPX. Swallowed them whole. Now they're being digested. Very sad. Very, very sad, because the SSPX was the resistance in the whole world. And they were doing such tremendous work for the glory of the church and tradition and souls. Schools, retreat houses, universities, colleges here at St. Mary's. Good priests preaching the faith. Every priest in every pulpit would be hammering Vatican II in the new Mass. Hammering the scandals of the local bishops with their rainbow masses. Hammering the scandals of Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI with his Assisi meetings, going to a mosque, facing Mecca, praying with the Muslims. And in 2012, we had the priest meeting. Let me just give you a little insight. The great Father James Hanos, he stands about 6'5". I call him Father Hugeness. And we were talking at the priest meeting, and he's a good priest. He's a cowboy priest. And a good priest. He was ordained in 1986 or 85 by Archbishop Lefebvre. Father James Hanos, he says, Bishop Fillet flew up to Post Falls. He took a private plane with this other guy to visit some priests here and some priests there. And he visited us priests. He talked to each one of us. And he was saying, it's about time for the agreement with Rome. And Father Hanos was saying, Bishop Fillet asked him, what do you think? And Father Hanos said, well, I think you're right. Maybe it is the right time for the agreement with Rome. So Bishop Fillet was, winning the favor of all the priests to go with the whole new revolution, the whole new direction. When Archbishop Lefebvre said no agreement with Rome, none until Rome proclaims the kingship of Christ, comes back to tradition, condemns Vatican II in the new Mass. So I said to Father Hanos, Father, wait a minute. Do you realize what you just said? Last October, we're in February 2012, so October of 2011, Pope Benedict XVI just held an Assisi meeting with all the world religions. And he says, we don't come together to pray. We didn't come to pray together, we come together to pray. All this ecumenical nonsense. And I told Father Hanos, but he allowed even an atheist to speak. Do you agree with all that? You think it's time for the agreement with Rome? And he said, I forgot about that. He says, you're right. It's not the time for the agreement with Rome. But he went along with it. I saw him in the airport a few years later, and I said, Father, did you read the Doctrinal Declaration? No, I don't read those bulletins. Well, you got to read it, because it's a true betrayal, a compromise of the faith. So the Doctrinal Declaration, notice it's doctrinal. For all us Catholics, the fight is always firstly doctrinal. When the popes write encyclicals, they're firstly defending doctrine, and they're ordering the bishops preach the doctrine and condemn heresy and error. That's the duty of bishops. Encyclical after encyclical and after encyclical. Leo XIII condemning Freemasonry. He orders the bishops, preach against them, tear the mask off. Let everyone know what the evil plans are for the Freemasons, to destroy all order, morality, and the Catholic Church herself. What happens as this doctrinal declaration was the 30 pieces of silver paid for all the recognition to come after. Now, at least the Society of St. Peter was honest. They said, all right, we accept Vatican II insofar as we accept the new Mass in principle, that is legitimately promulgated. We won't be polemical. And we'll sign the agreement with Rome. At least St. Peter's and all these other groups were honest. They made the agreement, they accepted compromise, and it was all up and open. With the new SSPX, it was done very sneakily by Bishop Fillet. No, we're not making an agreement. No, we're not making any canonical solution. But what's the essence of an agreement with modernist Rome? Anybody? What's the essence of that agreement? It is, you have to accept Vatican II, that it enlightens tradition, at least, that it's valid counsel and a true counsel of the Catholic Church, so you have to accept it. Second, you must accept the new Mass as legitimately promulgated. Third, you must accept the new Code of Canon Law. Hook, line, and sinker. But with the new Code of Canon Law, you just can't do that because it's loaded with heresies and errors. even Pope John Paul II, when he issued the new Code of Canon Law in 1983, his words and cover page was, "This is Vatican II in practice." The new Code of Canon Law is Vatican II in law, on wheels. So, for example, the evil of it is, if a Catholic marries a non-Catholic, according to the old Code of Canon Law, the non-Catholic must sign a paper promising to raise the children Catholic. In the new Code of Canon Law, that's completely dropped. So the harm to the faith of the children is already built in. So, and then the new Code of Canon Law allows giving Protestants and non-Catholics Holy Communion. This is called an outright sacrilege. Sacrilege is permitted right in the new Code of Canon Law. How can this be pleasing to God? How could Bishop Follet accept it? With hook, line, and sinker, without distinction. He should have at least have said, all right, we accept it insofar as it's in line with the old Code of Canon Law. He could have at least said that, but no, he doesn't. It's total acceptance of the new Code of Canon Law, which is a very serious betrayal to our Lord. And then they accept the new Profession of Faith in 1989, which was condemned by Archbishop Lefebvre. So in other words, they kicked Archbishop Lefebvre in the teeth, gave him the finger, and said, we don't need you anymore, you old man. We'll keep you on our Christmas tree at Christmas time and Easter. You're nice for the magazines, but don't tell us what to do. And even some of the priests, like Father Michel Simonon, who was rector of Écône, he came out with a big letter saying, this is not 88ism. Archbishop Lefebvre did much good for the society, but Bishop Follet is doing much more good for the society. He's done much more than Archbishop Lefebvre. Sorry, Archbishop Lefebvre has the grace of the founder. And he was an old seasoned warrior. He was a warrior, and he worked in Africa. He shoveled dirt. He probably changed diapers. He probably shoveled tons of septic tanks to clean them out with his own hands. He built bridges. He traveled all over Africa to establish missions, schools, orphanages, hospitals. The Africans loved him so much that in 1995 they put out a national stamp in honor of Archbishop Lefebvre. On every male in that country of Gabon and Senegal and throughout other parts of Africa, they loved him and honored Archbishop Lefebvre. And they still do. So here his own sons kick him in the teeth, they betray him, they're traitors. But it's all done with a smile. And all the priests, sad to say, where are they? Where are they? They should be standing up against this. We all know better. You don't compromise with Vatican II in the new Mass, in religious liberty. And Bishop Follet comes out in May 11th, 2012, in that CNS interview, saying, well, the heresies that we thought were heresies at Vatican II, they're not really heresies. And religious liberty, well, it's very limited, very limited. And I'm quoting him. When you got Pope after Pope after Pope condemning religious liberty as condemnable, as insanity, as, I forget all the adjectives the popes use to condemn it. It's a long list. And what's at the root of religious liberty, this heresy, is the uncrowning of Christ the King. He won't reign over the Catholic states anymore. We don't need Catholic states. So think of it. You got Muslim states, you got Jewish states, and we can't fight for a Catholic state? That's the big heresy of Vatican II. That's the heart of the whole fight, gentlemen. That's the whole heart of the fight is right there. We fight for Christ the King or we're against him. That is the heart of the fight of Vatican II. It's not the new Mass. That's secondary. And so now for the new SSPX and St. Peter's and all these compromised groups, it's all about the Mass, the Mass, the Mass. Latin Mass, Latin Mass, Latin Mass. Doesn't matter who says it. Doesn't matter if it's a compromised priest. Doesn't matter if he agrees with Vatican II and the new Mass. It doesn't matter if he's a homo or a Satanist. As long as he says the Latin Mass, you can go to it. Well, no, you can't. Because our ancestors would not go to Latin Masses of priests who signed the oath of the clergy at the French Revolution. The Catholics would not go to their Masses, and they were all Latin Masses. So what happens? We're wrapping this up. We've got about 7 minutes here. What happens? 2015. Pope Francis celebrates Vatican II, 50 years. 50 years of Vatican II, he celebrates. And to celebrate it, he allows the Society of St. Pius X to have just jurisdiction for 1 year for confessions. And Bishop Follet says, oh, this is wonderful. It's not a trap. It's not a trap. It's wonderful. This is good for the church. It's a trap. It's the oysters following the carpenter and the walrus, and they get boiled, and they're boiling and boiling. And then the year after 2016 and 17, they are given jurisdictions for marriages and confessions and holy orders. Now tell me, that's what you get when you make an agreement. Who is so big of an idiot that they can't see the connection? The Doctrinal Declaration was the 30 pieces of silver. It was the agreement with Rome. And Rome has granted ever since all these privileges, canonical recognitions, and jurisdictions. And they're saying it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So they're getting, they have to submit the marriages to the local diocesan bishops. The same bishops who are handing out annulments as long as you just fork out the money. And many annulments are not true annulments. Most of them. All an annulment is to declare that there was no marriage in the first place. Why? Because they do investigation and they realize the wife had a gun to her back. She was pressured into the marriage against her will. She was marrying an Italian guy and he was part of the mafia, and they warned her, if you don't marry him, you're going to be shredded. You'll be shot. So she gets married. There's no marriage. It's against her will. And all the church says is there was no marriage in the first place. That's just one example. Another example of an invalid marriage is if both spouses or one says, we don't want children. I don't want children. Well, that's the purpose of marriage, so it's not a valid marriage if they get married. So they abuse horribly the annulments. So these jurisdictions now, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it, but let me just say that for the SSPX, we always knew the church supplies our jurisdiction because we're in a state of emergency. Archbishop Lefebvre flew into other bishops' dioceses and confirmed and ordained priests by canon law. That's a huge crime. You don't do that. But it was clear the church is in a state of emergency, and souls need the true sacraments and the true doctrine. So the church always supplies our jurisdiction for marriages and confessions. Because the first law of canon law is the salvation of souls. Everyone understood this. Now that the society priests have jurisdiction for confessions, they can only hear their confessions of their given parishes. So I'm hearing it more and more. People who are not part of the parish, sorry, you can't get extreme unction. You're not a registered parishioner. We don't have jurisdiction for you. Do you see? Do you see the trap? Do you see the gimmick? So now that they have official jurisdiction, it's no longer a state of emergency, so they can't just help every soul that turns to us, turns to them. And I've heard of many priests, and I don't blame all priests. I know most of the society priests have good hearts and they want to be good, true priests. And they'll break their necks to give extreme unction to somebody. But I've heard of cases where they refuse to give extreme unction because, sorry, you're not a parishioner. You're not under my jurisdiction. So it's a gimmick. And then in 2015, you also have another phenomenon, as Bishop Williamson is offered this deal back in 2014. Father Pfeiffer tells him, don't take any deals. We're sick of hearing about deals. Bishop Williamson, whatever he does, he said, I have to look into it. He looks into it. Next thing we know, Bishop Williamson is coming out with new ideas, new opinions, saying that the new Mass gives grace, the new Mass can nourish your faith, the new Mass miracles. This was all new, at least publicly. He would never have said all this under Bishop Lefebvre. He would have been brutally corrected. So Bishop Williamson starts promoting the Novus Ordo in so many words. He's quite silent about the scandals of Pope Francis. So what happened? What kind of deal was this? What kind of deal was this? The people in England are furious because they all pitched in to help him buy the house in Broadstairs, which was very expensive because it's up right on the sea. In real estate on the sea is very high, as you know. And they all understood this would be a refuge for priests leaving the new SSPX, coming to the resistance. But many priests came, and Bishop Williamson said, don't come here, go back to the society. Don't come here, go back to the society. So, and he himself said, I don't believe in the resistance. So he's not the leader of the resistance. He's not. He doesn't want to be. However, to Bishop Williamson's credit, because he is a longtime warrior, to his credit, he did consecrate 6 bishops. 2 of them in public, the rest in secret, which was why? Why in secret? I asked Bishop Bellini, can you publicize your consecration by Bishop Williamson? This needs to be made public. Why the secrecy? You don't do that. The church is always public in her sacraments and teachings. But, all right, at least he consecrated 6 bishops. Let's hope among them, one of them will have a spine. But so far, they're all silent. It's as good as if he never consecrated anybody. And they're not really helping us priests. I went to Bishop Zendejas' own house, knocked at his door for over an hour. Went around the front, saw him meeting with some other men, and hi. I said hello through the window, and he sent one of them out to tell me he doesn't want to see you. All right, fine. Can I at least have holy oils? Because I'm taking care of dying people, baptisms. Sorry, he doesn't want to give you holy oils. So I wrote to Bishop Williamson about this. I went to Bishop Zendejas for holy oils. He won't give me holy oils. Your Excellency, can you at least be so kind? And I was never rude. I'm always respectful to Bishop Williamson. Always, always, because he's a father to me. You know what he responded to me? And you need to know this. He said, unless you start promoting the new Mass miracles publicly, giving examples, I will not send you holy oils. And if you don't comply, don't even write me any more emails because I'll block you along those lines. So, all right, Your Excellency, thank you. So, what do? And his 6 bishops, do you ever hear any of them preaching the faith? Bishop Bellini has a few public ones, but he doesn't dare to say anything against Bishop Williamson's erroneous teachings on the new Mass. And I asked him, why not? You have to show your real colors. In a war, you got to know what side you're on. Otherwise, you're going to get blasted. So please, Your Excellency, what side are you on? And you have a right to ask this of the priests and bishops Are you pro-Vatican II or not? Are you pro-New Mass or not? Are you pro-revolution with new Code of Canon Law and all that or not? Are you with tradition or not? You got to know. We have a right to know. But these 6 bishops, they're all silent. I hope I'm proven wrong. I hope one of them will rise up and just preach the faith and oppose even Bishop Williamson's errors. But so far, crickets chirping, souls being lost, confusion spreads. And then in 2012, Father Pfeiffer, I joined with him. We started the seminary simply to continue the work of the SSPX. Many priests supported it. Unfortunately, in 2019, Father Pfeiffer got over-involved with this Bishop Ambrose. That's when I had to leave. And then he really fell off the cliff with going into the Tuke line, which is the worst of all the Tuke lines, consecrated by so-called Bishop Neil Webster. Interesting, even the Tuke line bishops, Bishop Sanborn, Bishop Dolan, came out saying that was not a valid consecration because the Latin was so messed up it couldn't possibly be valid. And an eyewitness who told me that they did a re-consecration in the sacristy to make sure, an eyewitness told me that it was worse, the second one was worse than the first. So pray for Father Pfeiffer. He's misleading all these boys. And I don't think they're even invalid ordinations. It's sad because I know these boys. They have true vocations. They're good, generous guys. But they're not 5 years old either. They can do the research and see that Bishop Tuke was a nutcase. And he consecrated a non-Catholic as a bishop, which is an automatic excommunication. A very serious crime in the church. And he didn't act rationally. He consecrated 5 bishops for Pormo de Troia, where they elected their own pope. And he wasn't traditional either. He was on the liberal side at Vatican II. And he died at a Novus Ordo seminary. And he told Pope John Paul II and Pope Paul VI that he told one of them, I think John Paul II, I withheld my intentions when I consecrated these bishops. So that's not, Archbishop Lefebvre said, stay away from the Tuke line. Is it valid or not? I don't know, he said. So whatever is doubtful, you stay away from. So pray for Father Pfeiffer to pull out of that lie, that deception. All right, so here we are.
Sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
Thanks. Here we are, 2024, and the Catholic resistance goes on. Now, let me give you a little update. I have been writing to Bishop Bellini with the hopes that he will help. And believe it or not, he's willing to help. He wants to help confirm all the families that haven't been confirmed in 12 years. Now, my next letter to him will be, Your Excellency, it would be wonderful if you could take care of our souls, give them confirmation. He did send me holy oils, and I'm grateful for that. I gave the extras to Father Ruiz. So he's willing to help, which is a good sign. He does have some spine during the lockdowns in Ireland, which were very violent. If you were caught 5 miles away from home, you were ticketed and fined and could go to jail. So he was pulled over many times, and he told the cops, go ahead and arrest me. I'm taking care of souls. I have masses to say. I have extreme unction to give. And the Irish police just said, oh, okay, Father, go ahead. And he also led a rosary around the city hall in Dublin. I forget what for, but it was a good act, a good public defiance of liberalism. So I have a lot of hope with Bishop Bellini. I hope. But it's not too much for me to ask him, can you say publicly where you really stand with Bishop Williamson's false teachings and Bishop Follet's false compromises? Can you make a public stand? That's not asking too much. In other words, whose side are you really on? You can tell me privately you don't like ice cream, but if I see you publicly eating ice cream, something's wrong here. You can tell me privately you don't agree with Bishop Williamson's false teachings, but publicly, if you don't say anything against it, whose side are you really on? And you might say this is nitpicking. No, it's not. We're in war. Doctrine matters. And we have a right as Catholics to know where every priest and bishop really stands. Because it's a matter of the faith. And if you lose the faith, you go to hell. That's how serious it is. And you have a right to ask all these priests at St. Mary's, where do you really stand? Are you really with the new Code of Canon Law? Are you really with the new Mass is legitimately promulgated? Well, if you are, you're no longer a son of Archbishop Lefebvre, nor a fighter for tradition. You betrayed our Lord. And believe me, any priest of the society who condemns the doctrinal declaration, who condemns the general chapter statement, who condemns the 6 conditions with Rome, who condemns all the modernism going on, off with their head. They don't dare say anything. So here we are, 2024, Ignatian Retreat. The battle rages on. Father Ruiz is a great warrior. He's a Cristero priest. And he's solid. And it's a great joy to work with him. He was ordained in 1986 by 1985 by Archbishop Lefebvre in a cone. And he often says it himself, where are all the priests that know better? How did they slide with it? They know better. He thinks most of it is just cowardice. Just cowardice. Because it's true, once you oppose all this, you're kicked out, you're put to the street, you're a know-nothing. None of them know you anymore. They treat you like an enemy. They smear your name, all that. But isn't that what we're supposed to get following our Lord? We haven't been put in prison yet. We haven't even been flogged yet, nor stoned 3 times like St. Paul. So pray for all the priests. I know many of you know good society priests, and they're good priests. Just pray that they can grow a spine and defend the faith. So pray for them all. Pray for me too and Father Ruiz. Any of us can fall, Without God's grace, we can all fall. So we got to humbly beg the grace to persevere, stay close to the Virgin Mary. And maybe someday I'll be able to announce, I'm hopeful that someday I'll be able to announce, look, here's a bishop who's publicly taken a stand. Maybe one of the 6 bishops of Archbishop Lefebvre, of Bishop Williamson. Better yet, one of the 4 of Bishop of Lefebvre. Archbishop Vigano, he's certainly sticking his neck out for the truth. Let's hope he's the real thing, and he seems to be. So pray for him as well. But that's where we're at. The battle rages on, the bullets are flying, the mines are going off. We got the enemy in front of us, we got the enemy behind us, we got the enemy in Novo Sordo, compromised St. Peter's and USSPX, we've got Indult, we got the enemy all around us. We got the enemies right where we want them. It's the best place to be. Wherever you shoot, you're going to advance. So it's wonderful because we're like in the time of the Jews surrounded by the armies of Holofernes. They're poisoning the water of the Jews, so the water even became poison. And the head priest said, God, we give you 6 days. If you don't answer us in 6 days, we're surrendering. And Judith came out and said, who are you to tempt God? She said, we must trust in God. He will bring a solution to this problem. And she, inspired by the Holy Ghost, she went into her room, took off her black clothes because she was a widow. And the scripture says 3 times God made her more beautiful. She put on her best dress, her best makeup. She didn't need makeup, but she put on a little bit. She did her hair in a wonderful wavy way. She came out and all the Israelite men were like, whoa, where did she come from? She leaves the city gates, makes her way with her maidens and her purse across the whole valley. Holofernes' armies, all the men are there hanging around ready for the new battle. And they see this beautiful Israelite Judith coming. And they're all like, whoa, if all the women are this pretty over there, we better not kill all these women. She's stunningly beautiful. And God made her so. So long story short, she ends up, Holofernes, the general, has a huge party that night. They all get drunk, including him. Judith is there, and she goes into the tent where he's sleeping. She says, Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, strengthen me in this hour. She takes her sword out of her purse and cuts his head off, puts it in her purse, wraps it in blankets, puts it in her purse, and she tiptoes through all the drunk guys back to Israel, back to Jerusalem. And she comes to the city walls, they let her in. All the city gathers and the high priest is there, and she pulls out this head dripping blood, the head of Holofernes. And they go to war and they sack him. And the armies of Holofernes, they look for him, the general, they find his dead body in blood, and they all just scatter. The Israelites drive them out, massacre them, and they win. Judith prefigures the Virgin Mary who cuts off the head of the serpent. To her is given the victory, this next victory is hers. So if we fight under her banner with her rosary, do the 5 first Saturdays, keep her scapular, keep devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary and reparation, you're on the winning battle. You're going to win. Even if they kill us all, there's going to be one that will always profess the faith. And we know that Our Lady said, in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. So keep fighting, gentlemen. Keep battling and be generous with God in this war, because great will be your glory in heaven. If we persevere, great will be your glory in heaven. We can go straight to lunch.